In the summer of the year 717, an Arab fleet, larger than anything the Mediterranean had ever seen, closed on the walls of Constantinople. It was the second great attempt to take the city, and the plan was sound. Hundreds of ships, tens of thousands of men, a siege that would starve the last Roman capital into surrender and open the road into Europe. The empire that had ruled the world was down to one fortified city on the water, and the fleet had come to finish it. And then the sea caught fire. Out from the harbor came the Byzantine ships, low and fast, and from bronze tubes on their prows, they threw a liquid flame across the water. It clung to hulls and rigging and did not go out. Sailors who leapt into the sea to escape it found the water around them burning too. Whole ships were consumed where they floated. The great fleet was broken, not by numbers, but by a fire that no one on the other side had ever seen and no one could put out. The Arab advance into Europe stopped at those walls. The city held for another 7 centuries. The weapon that saved it was a state secret so completely guarded that it was never written down in full. And today, 1,300 years later, nobody on earth knows exactly what it was made of. This is the history of Greek fire, the closest thing the ancient world had to a superweapon, and one of the very few technologies that humanity invented, used for centuries, and then lost so completely that we have never been able to make it again. Start with what it did, because that is the only solid ground we have. Greek fire was a liquid. It was pumped under pressure through a bronze nozzle on the front of a ship and set alight as it sprayed, so that it went out over the water as a jet of burning liquid, in effect, a flamethrower. 1,000 years before anyone thought that word. 2 things made it terrifying, and both are genuinely attested. It stuck. Whatever it landed on wood, rope, cloth, skin, it clung to and kept burning, which meant you could not simply brush it off. And water did not stop it. Throwing water on it did nothing useful, and the sources agree it burned on the surface of the sea itself. Now, a caution, because this is where legend takes over from history. The medieval accounts say things that are almost certainly exaggerated, that it could only be quenched with vinegar or sand or urine, that it ignited on contact with water. Modern historians treat those as the tall tales that grow around a wonder weapon. What is solid is narrower and stranger, a liquid fire thrown by machine that stuck and burned on water. As for the recipe, the honest answer is that we do not know it. The best modern guess is that the base was petroleum, light crude that seeps naturally from the ground around the Black Sea and the Caspian, probably thickened with resins to make it cling, and possibly with other additives. That would make it a distant chemical cousin of napalm. But that is a reconstruction, not a recovered formula. The real thing left no recipe behind. The tradition gives the invention a name and a date. Around the year 670, as Arab fleets were beginning to threaten Constantinople for the first time, a man arrived in the city as a refugee. His name is given as Kallinikos, and he is described as an architect or engineer from Heliopolis in what is now Lebanon or Syria, a region where people had known for centuries that certain oils seeping from the ground would burn. He brought with him, the sources say, the secret of a fire that could be thrown from ships. Whether he invented it outright or refined something that already existed in the oil-rich lands he came from, we cannot say. Incendiary weapons were old news. Armies had been throwing burning pitch and naphtha for centuries. What was new was the delivery, a pressurized siphon that could project the burning liquid as a continuous jet, and a formulation that clung and burned on water. The Empire understood immediately what it had been handed. This was not just another fire arrow. This was a weapon that could destroy a fleet before it ever came close enough to board. And Constantinople was a city that lived or died by the sea. They took the secret and they buried it so deep that it would outlast the empire itself. To understand why it mattered so much, you have to picture the machine, because the machine was half the secret. On the prow of a Byzantine warship sat a bronze tube, the siphon. Below decks, hidden, was the dangerous part, a sealed bronze container of the liquid and some means of heating it and putting it under pressure. Braziers and a force pump and an air chamber to keep the pressure steady. When the valve was opened, the pressurized liquid was driven up and out through the nozzle, and a soldier ignited it at the mouth as it sprayed. Think about what that means to build and to operate. You are running a pressurized, heated tank of flammable liquid over open flame on a wooden ship in the middle of a battle. A leak, a crack, a moment of bad luck, and you burn your own vessel to the waterline. The Byzantines were, in effect, sailing a bomb toward the enemy and hoping it went off in the right direction. It took training that only the state could provide, equipment that only the imperial arsenal could build, and nerve. And it had real limits which the sources are honest about. The range was short, a matter of tens of meters, and it worked best in calm water with the wind behind you. This was not a weapon you used to conquer. It was a weapon you used to defend a harbor, and for that, it was almost perfect. Here is what makes Greek fire different from almost every other ancient technology. The Byzantines kept it secret on purpose, completely, and it worked. The formula and the details of the apparatus were treated as one of the highest state secrets of the empire. According to the sources, the knowledge was restricted to the imperial family and to the one family of technicians, said to descend from Callinicos himself, who manufactured it. It was not written down in any complete form. It was not sold. It was not shared even with close allies. A Byzantine emperor writing a manual of statecraft for his son told him that if a foreign ruler ever asked for the secret of the liquid fire, he was to refuse, and to say that it had been revealed to the first Christian emperor by an angel, with strict instruction that it be made only by Christians and only in the capital, and that anyone who tried to give it away would be struck down. That is not a historical account of where the fire came from. It is a cover story, a piece of sacred misinformation designed to make the secret feel too holy and too dangerous to hand over. And it tells you how seriously they guarded it. They wrapped a chemical formula in a threat from heaven to keep it from leaking. For a technology to survive, someone has to teach it to the next generation. The Byzantines made sure the circle of people who knew was as small as possible. That kept it safe for centuries. It would also, in the end, be exactly how it died. For a long time, the secret paid for itself many times over. The first sustained Arab effort against Constantinople through the 670s was worn down in part by the new fire. The far larger siege of 717 to 718, the one that opened this story, was broken by it, and that siege was one of the genuine turning points of history. Had the city fallen, there was little organized to stop an advance up through the Balkans into the heart of Europe. It did not fall, and it was not only foreign fleets. The fire was used against rebels, against Rus raiders who came down the rivers in their longships, expecting to sack the richest city in the world, and instead met a sea that burned. Again and again, the pattern held: an enemy fleet, confident, closing on the city, and then the low ships, and the bronze tubes, and the flame on the water, and the confidence gone. For roughly 4 centuries, Greek fire was part of what made Constantinople feel unconquerable. The walls on the landward side, the sea on every other side, and on that sea, a weapon nobody else possessed. It became part of the mystique of the empire, proof to its own people that God was on their side, because who else could have given them fire that burned on water? The mystique was real. So was the problem hiding inside it. Of course, the empire's enemies tried to copy it. They had every incentive. A weapon that could break fleets was worth any amount of espionage, and Byzantium was surrounded by rivals who fought it for centuries and had every opportunity to capture ships, question prisoners, and pick through the wreckage. Some of them did develop incendiary weapons of their own. The Arabs, in particular, used naphtha-based fire in war. But nobody seems to have reproduced the specific Byzantine system, the exact formulation that clung and burned on water, delivered by that pressurized siphon. Part of that is the secrecy, but part of it is the nature of the thing. Even if you captured the siphon intact, you still would not have the recipe for the liquid. And the liquid without the machine, or the machine without the liquid, was useless. You needed the oil from the right sources, the thickeners in the right proportion, the apparatus, built and maintained by people who had done it before, and crews trained not to kill themselves with it. It was a whole system, and a system is much harder to steal than an object. So the secret held for generation after generation, which sounds like a triumph. But a secret held that tightly is a secret with almost no margin for error. It survived only as long as the small circle of people who carried it survived. And empires do not last forever. This is the heart of it, and it is the part that should stay with you, because it is not really a story about fire. It is a story about how knowledge dies. A technology is not a thing. It is a chain of living people, each one taught by the last. The formula in a book is not enough. Anyone who has tried to cook from a recipe written by someone who assumed you already knew what you were doing understands this. The real knowledge is in the hands. The exact temperature, the feel of the mixture, the 1,000 small adjustments that never get written down because the people doing them never imagined they might be the last. Greek fire was guarded so well that the chain was always thin, and over the centuries, the empire declined. It lost the territories where the raw oil came from. It lost wars and arsenals, and the money to maintain specialist crews. The weapon appears less and less in the accounts as the centuries pass. By the time of the later empire, it seems to have faded from use, perhaps because the supply of the right materials was cut off, perhaps because the unbroken line of technicians who knew how to make it was finally broken. And once that chain snaps, it does not matter how much you want the knowledge back. There is no one left to ask. The people who could have taught it are gone, and they took the unwritten part, the part that was never in any book, it to the ground with them. When Constantinople finally fell in 1453, it fell to cannon. Gunpowder, the weapon we met in this series before, which had come out of China and industrialized in Europe. The city that had once burned fleets with a fire nobody could copy was broken by a technology anyone could buy. The age of the secret weapon was over. The secret had already been lost for a long time. You might reasonably ask, we have chemistry now. Why can we not simply work it out? In one narrow sense, we can. We can make liquids that burn on water and stick to what they touch. Napalm does exactly that, and it is not hard to formulate something with the broad behavior the sources describe. If all you want is a fire that clings and burns on the sea, modern chemistry solved that a century ago, but that is not the same as recovering Greek fire. What is lost is the specific thing, the exact recipe the Byzantines used, the precise mixture of oils and resins and whatever else went into it, and the exact design and operation of the siphon that threw it. Those details were never fully written down, the objects have not survived, and the people are 1,700 years gone. Experimental archaeologists have built working siphon flamethrowers and fired approximations across the water, and they burn impressively. But every one of them is a modern reconstruction, an educated guess dressed in bronze. None of them is the thing itself. This is what lost technology actually means. It rarely means that something was so advanced we cannot approach it. It usually means something humbler and sadder, that a working method existed, that it lived only in a small number of hands, that it was never written down completely, and that the hand stopped before anyone thought to save it. We can build something that does what it did. We cannot recover what it was. So consider what it really is. Greek fire is the story of the most important secret a state ever kept, and of the exact price of keeping it. The Byzantines did everything right, by the logic of secrecy. They restricted the knowledge to a tiny circle. They wrote almost nothing down. They wrapped it in a threat from heaven, and it worked. For 400 years the secret held, and the fire saved the city again and again. And then the same secrecy that protected it killed it, because a thing known to almost no one is a thing that can vanish the moment those few are gone. The Byzantines guarded the fire so well that in the end, they guarded it out of existence. There was no leak. There was no theft. There was simply a last person who knew, and then there was not. It is one of the very few things the human race has ever done and then genuinely forgotten how to do. Not a myth of lost golden ages, but a documented weapon used in real battles described by real historian and gone. Its recipe erased not by catastrophe, but by caution. Somewhere off the walls of Constantinople, the sea once burned, and the men who made it burn took the how of it to their graves so carefully, so completely, that 13 centuries of chemists and historians have never quite put it back together. They kept the secret. That was the whole point. They kept it forever.